Welcome to another episode of Uncovering Joy, an interview series where I get to chat to some truly inspiring people who have me lit up in their quest to live a life of passion, integrity, and connection. You know, it's such a wonderful invitation for us to do the same, to find what brings us that quiver of delight, that spark of joy to grab life and embrace it, and all of it. Understanding that it's not so much the things that we do, but who we're being as we do them that matters the most. Each of our doings then becomes this vehicle that shines the light of our greater truth. And so there's nothing more alluring than someone who's tuned in and connected and aligned. We get to feel our own energy shift just by being in their presence, held in the deliciousness of their passion and their excitement. And today's guest is just that. And so Lily's a medical herbalist and wellness practitioner, specialising in women's health and stress management. With over 6 years of study and training, she's formed a clinical practice that weaves together the traditional wisdoms of mind, nutrition, Ayurveda, and herbs, forming this cohesive and powerful holistic toolkit. And so I'm completely enamored with her wisdom, more so her ability to share it with warmth and such amazing insight. And I know that you will be too. And so without further ado, Lily, welcome. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your time, your presence, and your energy.
Oh, it's so lovely to be here. Thank you for that lovely introduction.
Such a pleasure. So something I really love about this interview series, aside from the fact that selfishly I get to speak to some really awesome people, is that it really feels like this clear and felt access point to understanding this concept of many different paths and one destination. I feel like as a human collective, there's this inherent seeking to experience connection, to experience wholeness. And yet the way in which we access that kind of innate and inherent space is wonderfully vast and varied. And I love even seeing in what you offer, there's already this weaving together, this pulling together of so much of life, an invitation to reach so much of life. And at least for me, in my own exploration of kind of understanding the mind, Eastern philosophies, not just about health and medicine, but everything. And then the power of plants. It's just increasingly fascinating. And I think in and of itself just calls you into such a deep connection to yourself and to the life and the world around you. And so I'd love to hear just a little bit about your own journey and what was the catalyst that kind of pushed you towards delving into that rich world.
Sure. It's so funny. I look back now at how I got here, and I think I would have found it another way if I hadn't have gone the way I did come, because actually so much of where I am now makes so much sense. Because when I was little and a child, I was surrounded by nature and almost was a herbalist by proxy, in the sense that, you know, we were using herbal medicine in our lives, but not as a sort of direct medicine. You know, I didn't necessarily think of it as being medicine because I was told medicine was a doctor and someone you go and see. And so when I had peppermint tea after dinner or a chamomile tea when I was really upset, that wasn't to me medicine. It was just innate knowledge and wisdom, and that was passed down to me from my mum, and it was passed down to her from her mum, as has always been the way, and hopefully will continue to be the way. More and more nowadays, obviously, that knowledge is not as clearly fed on from generation to generation, which then, you know, requires people such as myself who then go and train to hopefully share that wisdom, not just with my future children, but with people a bit wider in the community. But yeah, I look back and think I already knew a lot of it back then. And actually, it's so not to be underestimated, that knowledge, because we all have a lot of it, even with spice knowledge, and knowing which spices to add to your food, not just from a taste perspective, but from a warming perspective and things like that. But my actual journey began studying psychology at university. Really just have always felt called to working one-on-one with people, working kind of to help people. That's always been something I've been drawn to do. Maybe again, because in my family come from a lineage of counsellors and therapists. So it makes quite a lot of sense. And I had a certain module at uni on the effect of food on mood, and it just completely opened my eyes. I loved food already, and definitely was probably quote unquote like a healthy eater, but this sort of really made it so obvious how what you eat is how you feel is what you do is how, you know, it's all completely so important and all encompassing really. And I was like, wow, this is awesome. I want to do nutrition. I want to learn more about this. You know, there's more I can do here. And it sort of, again, was weaving together things because I love food. And so the idea of then learning about how it can help us felt perfect for me. And I decided to go and study nutrition, and I actually left the country and went to study in Sydney, which was both a sort of desire to experience another life, and in my mind the life in Bondi Beach was quite alluring. And also they are and have been for a while, especially in Sydney, ahead of the game in terms of wellness and an openness to alternative practitioners and health and looking after your whole body. So I went there and I studied nutrition and I loved it, and I thought that was what I was going to do, and to an extent it is what I do because a lot of my work is on food and I use a lot of that knowledge in everyday life as well as within my clinical practice. But I became a bit of a greedy learner in Sydney, and it's the best way I can describe it. And I was talking, well, I had lessons with the herbalists. We were all put in one room, and they would say things like, oh, this would be a classic case for some marshmallow or something. And I was sitting there thinking, what? You know, what, why? Like, why do they need marshmallow? And they'd be like, oh, because it's so soothing. And this person is screaming, they need marshmallow. And I was like, I'm screaming, I need to know what that means. Like, what? And I started like talking to them more in my breaks and afterwards, and I was like, you guys know what I know and some, and I need that extra thing. So I swapped courses. I crossed the path boundaries, and also I think another factor that played into that was I knew quite a lot of nutritionists at home. I knew about nutritionists. You know, I would have been open-minded to see a nutritionist, but herbal medicine felt like something new, something different, something extra, something edgy, not in the cool way, but in literally edgy. And it was exciting to me. I think I've always been someone, again, this has only come through looking back and in hindsight, who's always just basically chosen the path less trodden. And there's obviously something that attracts me to that kind of element of exploration and excitement that comes from choosing that path. So I did, kind of not really knowing what I was getting myself in for, and ended up doing this degree in herbal medicine, which was wonderful. It was very heavily scientific, which is not something I had anticipated. I liked that about it because I think even in myself there was an element of skepticism at the beginning, just through lack of understanding what it was. And so I loved that it was deeply rooted in the scientific research around the herbs, as well as the traditional and ancient wisdom that herbs bring. That was just a perfect marriage for me of the two. And yeah, I graduated 2.5 years ago, just before the pandemic, which was not a great time to launch a business, but it was fine. And actually from that, I birthed a tea company because I couldn't be practicing with my patients in the normal way. So I decided to do something a bit different. So I'm grateful for the pandemic because it made me stop and slow down and do things a bit differently. And now a lot of my practice is online, which enables me to see people technically all over the world. And again, I don't know if I'd be doing that today if it hadn't have been for that sort of that hurdle in the road that COVID pandemic was or is. So yeah, that's where I am today. But as I say, the knowledge I hold now and the way I look at it feels like it's definitely come full circle. I have gone from being the more skeptical person who wanted the science to now being the person who embraces the ancient wisdom and traditional understandings of the plants I hold that in much higher regard these days than I do the science. 100% don't disregard it. It's fascinating and it's great to learn what little tiny active phytochemical is responsible for this action and things like that. But the wonder of the profession definitely comes in how many years behind it there have been, how many people have discovered it along the way, and how, as you say, I guess, just being with the plants and being able to like learn about foraging and learning about them just as plants, it becomes part of who I am, and it's definitely slowed me down and made me have such a deeper gratitude for the world around us and the turnings of the seasons and all they have to offer. So sorry, that was a very long-winded answer, but it's been a bit of a long journey.
You could have gone on. I loved it. I loved eating it up. I really love that you recognize that there was already this connection happening when you were younger, and I seem to hear, I feel like I hear that a lot with people's journeys. And maybe even that was a thing that kind of sparked you to move down towards more the herbalism, because there's one thing I've noticed is through you and that invitation to connect more to the plants around me is connecting back to the land that's always been my home that I perhaps took for granted. And you know, I think we can quite easily lean into things like traditional Chinese medicine and Ayurveda. Something I love that you say is that we're reclaiming the knowledge that was once already ours. I read this book, If Women Rose Rooted, and she's kind of focusing on kind of like folklore and like what was our tradition here. And I feel like herbalism was such a big one that has been lost, and we forget that there's already something that's ours that kind of gives us similarities to what Ayurveda or traditional Chinese medicine might be saying, like kind of moving with the seasons. And so what is it about plants that you love so much? And for someone who isn't yet interested, or maybe they're kind of like piquing the interest and they're feeling that kind of reaction from the body, like, yeah, there's something here, like the stirrings of the soul, how would you invite them to explore it maybe a little bit more?
What it is that I love is they are so generous. You know, they not only, if you're just looking at them, you know, there's no touch, there's no taste, there's no medicine. If you're just purely using the eyes, they are a wonder to behold and can, you know, cheer up your day or bring you a state of calm or energize you or excite you just purely by looking at them. You know, don't underestimate the power of walking in nature and just using your eyes. That's just the start. And then you could then say, well, then, you know, they have incredible smells and they then have incredible properties of warming qualities we talk about in herbal medicine, like warming, cooling, drying, these things. And then going another step further, they then have the possibilities to bring your body back into balance, and they're always there, they're always waiting to heal you, they're out there, sort of thing. They've got your back. And I think that's lovely. That's amazing. And I think something though that I've learned more maybe through my own whole discovery of herbal medicine is their kind of cyclical nature. So this is not specific to herbal medicine at all. This is just plants. The plant world is the fact that you can learn to grow them, and by learning to grow them, understand plants so much better, and you can draw parallels to life time and time and time again, and the patience it bestows upon you to wait and to think ahead and to plant for next season. And then when you do plant for yourself and you are growing either your own medicine or just cutting flowers or vegetables, the respect you then have for the gifts that plant brings, whether it is going to be medicine for your tea or food for your table, is just so different to buying it. It's crazy. You know, I'm a big eater, like I like big portions of food, but if I'm eating something I've foraged or I've grown, I'm there sort of literally mindfully chewing every single bite, eating so slowly and having a very small portion, because I'm sort of in wonder of what has been created and wanting it to sort of last forever. And I think if I can be that way all the time and slowly, it is teaching me that even if I'm buying food, someone has grown that food somewhere, or someone has created this medicine, someone has grown this plant, and therefore that has just as much reason to be chewed slowly and mindfully consumed and given gratitude for. And it actually is, everything I'm saying is really mimicking the words from Braiding Sweetgrass, which is a book I've just recently read and highly recommend if you're wanting, you're dipping your toe into the world of plants. It is a celebration of it all and manages to credit history and everything that has come before, but also talk about ways though that, again, the narrative in plants can be so helpful for us, not only just our mental health, but also actually even in things we're having to tackle in everyday life. So thinking about climate change, just looking at how the plants survive and what they do and everything can teach us so much wisdom. So my advice for people wanting to dip their toe in is, if you have space, grow a garden. If you don't, get on your allotment register. I've just got to the top of our allotment register and I've got an allotment space, which is very exciting. Stay tuned for much allotment content probably to come. But the best way is to start growing, to get your hands in the dirt, plant seeds, watch them grow and learn that way. And if you absolutely can't do that, then foraging is the next best thing, seeing what's already out there.
I'm in the middle of that book and I love it so much.
It's just, I've literally just got it next to me because it's always here. I constantly turn back to it and like I'm like, oh, I wish I had dog-eared every page, but it was someone else's book, so I didn't. And then I went and got my own copy. And it's then that thing of being like, oh, there was that one line that was just transformational, and I'm there like trying to find it. And there's actually, I was reading this morning this one bit here, that there's a whole section of the book on gratitude, basically, and how they have within her culture traditionally this very, very long grateful Thanksgiving speech, and how one of her children at school had said something like, oh, it's so long, and she was like, how lucky are you to have so much to be grateful for? And it was just so true. Like when you do stop and actually think, like I remember someone saying something like, oh, you should start a gratitude practice and write 3 things at the end of the day you're grateful for. And I was like, 3? I mean, I could write so many more than 3. It's going to take me too long. I mean, maybe it would help me sleep, because I'd probably still be there like trying to write it out.
Same thing. And I love that part too. It's just so beautiful that you can open your awareness. And it's what I hear in what you're saying about the plants and this idea of gratitude and appreciation. Like if it opens your awareness on that level, it opens you to everything else that's around you too.
Yeah. And like, I think this year, even more so, I've been so aware of the seasons, something probably about, lockdowns and being more rooted at home and things like that. And I think now we're in autumn, there's such I'm so aware of autumn just because of the things that then become abundant in autumn and you're able to forage. You have to really watch them though, because berries are traditionally, are what we normally look for in autumn. Berries, nuts really are the 2 things, and it's berries at the start, nuts at the end, generally speaking. And if you're not quick enough, the birds will take them all, and that's great. We want the birds to take them. The birds will disperse them and keep their lives going on happily, but obviously it'd be nice to have some too to share with the birds. And so you have to really tune in and watch, and constantly be watching, waiting for that turn to happen because then you're gifted with the abundance that they then bring, and therefore it forces you to look and watch and wait, and all of those things are so important in everyday life rather than just going and grabbing. And so they teach, that's what I love about it, is you can draw parallels from plants in your own life time and time again, and I probably could just talk all day about that.
I really love what you said about this idea of kind of the cycles as well, the rhythms, and seasons is something I've definitely been tuning into, because I was away for about 5, almost 6 years, and that meant not having an autumn or a winter, which I could feel it really strongly. But I've also felt over the last year of being home, like spring, summer, what I found fascinating is noticing how my cravings shift. I really felt it in food, and noticed that I would actually be craving the stuff that was seasonal if I got quiet enough to listen. And so through last winter, and I feel it happening, like wanting kind of warm stewed apples or stewed pears, and then I get to a point where like, no, I don't want that anymore, and it was just not something in my desire or craving whatsoever. And I felt that recently, like salads, like not in my mind whatsoever.
Gone.
Yeah, like bring me the soup.
Yeah, no, it's so true. I have a friend who I love dearly, because she always says things to me, like, for example, last week she said, now it's autumn, what are you doing differently? I need to know, like, what should I be tuning into? And I was like, well, I actually have made some changes. So I've changed from having lemon water in the morning to having ginger powder in the morning in water. And that's, a natural shift. Lemon is cooling. You have that in summer. As you move into autumn, ginger is warming. It's a lovely, easy shift that everyone can do. And ginger, if you didn't know, is sort of a peripheral vasodilator, which basically means it dilates all your blood vessels in your peripheries. So your hands, your toes, your fingers, and your feet. Really great after a cold swim. So, and I think the best way to take it is the powder rather than the fresh, just because if you use fresh ginger and you try and make a sort of drink out of it, I just never get the kick of ginger. It's always just a slight flavor. So if you use like half a teaspoon of the powder and you work it into your water, that's a great way of doing it. But that was one of my shifts. And then there were other ones which she was enjoying. Like I wear something called a haramaki in autumn. Which I don't know if you know what that is, but it's part of it really comes from Chinese medicine, but it's basically like a piece of cotton. How do I describe it? If you're wearing like really high-waisted pants, it's essentially just like the top bit of so it's like almost like a what are the things you wear around your neck, like a snood, but like it would fit around basically your middle, and it's essentially just meant to cover your kidneys, because in Chinese medicine, kidneys are what become depleted in cold weather and climates, or cold swimming, or whatever cold scenarios you're putting yourself in. And the kidneys are important for kind of their vital energy, for producing qi and everything. So keeping them warm through autumn and winter is really important. And I think, would be appalled by the idea of a crop top or anything, even in summer, because I think always they need to be covered. And so whether you're wearing high-waisted knickers or you need a haramaki, or both in my case, then it honestly feels like you're being snuggled every day, because it's like tight around your waist as well. So it's a bit of a game changer for autumn.
What's it called? A haramaki?
It's called haramaki, or I guess kidney warmer. You could probably find it under.
Okay, I have to get on board with that. I totally know, like all the whole I have a Chinese doctor I go to sometimes, and he's always telling me off about kidney qi.
Well, there you go. You can be like, I've got my haramaki on.
Exactly, then he'll be kinder to me. So I'd love to know, I know you specialize with women's health, and I think rhythm is something that's really important on that aspect too, particularly when it comes to like menstrual cycle and menstrual cycle health. It's something that I know in my own experience I became very disconnected to. It just wasn't something I was taught to even kind of observe or become attuned to. And much like even with the rhythms of, let's say, seasonal changes and how we can resist or become disconnected in terms of like what the body's really calling for as it seeks for balance, I feel like the same thing can happen through women's cycles, in that we don't give ourselves the grace to, let's say, slow down. And I remember for a long time, and when that longing would happen during the cycle, it just was something that was inefficient and slightly annoying, but actually it probably caused more harm than good, the fact that I ignored it. And so I'd love to know kind of what brought you to focusing a little bit on women's health, and what you do to help bring women back to that deeper connection and intimacy with something that's actually really rewarding.
Yeah, no, completely. I love working with women. It sort of happened organically, I think, being a woman myself, and I had a few things like potential diagnosis with PCOS and things that just opened my eyes to the area of women's health. And I think also it became apparent during my studies that herbs do so much for women's health. And if you Google conditions like PCOS, endometriosis, some of the big ones that a huge number of women seem to be suffering with these days, if you look at sort of the classic NHS website, and in terms of treatment, they are quote unquote untreatable according to orthodox medicine, and that isn't true. I know too many people who have been told that by their GP or by their specialist, and then have come to alternative medicine and have basically been shown that changing from the bottom up, whether that's diet changes with the addition of herbs or just the diet, you can either get to a place where you're completely symptom free or it's gone altogether. And I think more and more women need to know that there is other options out there, and therefore that also made me feel quite passionate about sitting in this seat, because most of the women who come my way have had a disappointing experience with the orthodox system, and you can just see the dropping of the shoulders and the relief when they tell their story, and it's not a sort of response of being like, oh yes, well that's quite normal, which normal doesn't mean it's common doesn't mean normal. Common and normal are two words that are commonly misused for women's health, I think, because people think period pain is normal, and I'm like, it's not normal, it's common. And people think that people just get it wrong basically, and that's because there's a lot of misinformation out there, and there's also just been a lack of information in the women's health sphere, which is sort of from years of biased gendered healthcare, and so that's sort of why I'm here. And also, I guess, in a similar way, I love talking to women about it because I live it myself. It feels very right and aligned in that sense, and I learn from them, and that benefits me, and they learn from me, and that's just a really lovely exchange. So yeah, a lot of women come because they have a hormone imbalance or a problem with regard to PCOS or endometriosis or heavy periods or no periods, or they want help with conception, or acne, things like that, which are tailored into the different women's health conditions. And alongside diet, which is fundamental and foundational in all of those things, and some incredible herbs which can really help bring back the balance, so much is down to lifestyle changes basically. And that's really where the awareness of your cycle and the infradian rhythm, which is what the monthly rhythm is all about, because there are some quite specific ones. So exercise is one. So time and time again, women come to me who are all out, they're going at it all the time. And whether that's mentally or exercise, it's kind of actually the same. And interestingly, with exercise as well in women's health, is that if you exercise too much and you are going at it all the time, what your body says is, because essentially there's not enough, there will be a depletion of calories because your exercise output is greater than your calorie input, that your body says you're starving, there must be a famine outside. That's what your body thinks. And because of that, they're like, this is not the time to bring a baby into the world because there's a famine outside. So they switch off ovulation as a protective mechanism, because your body's like, you shouldn't be creating a baby because there's clearly not enough food for you, let alone another baby. So switches it all off, and then, you know, your period will slow down or stop, and then other conditions will arise. And that is very, very common. That's something I see a lot of. And while high intensity interval training or high intensity type exercise is good, it's good at certain times of the month. And that's a really great way of like starting people's understanding into this cyclical understanding, because there are times in the month where your cortisol levels are lower and your metabolism is slower, and so they can both do with a bit of a raz. You know, your cortisol can do with spiking up because it's already quite low, and your metabolism is slow, so you could do with hoiking it up. So going all out on a heavy run or a high intensity interval training session is actually fine. And if it's going to make you feel good and you like doing that sort of exercise, and then they're ones you can do then. But there are other times, especially on your period, for example, that your cortisol is already high and your metabolism is already high, so you don't need to do exercise, number one. But also, if you do, it's going to make your cortisol levels grow even more. And high cortisol, as we kind of all know, that's a sort of that kind of extended chronic stress state, does everything bad, from muck up your hormones as a woman, to not make you sleep, to muck up your blood sugar, to, I mean, everything. So learning about when is good to run and when is good to rest. And it doesn't mean no exercise. I think lots of people are scared of the times when we tell them to slow down. It doesn't need to mean nothing. In fact, doing mild exercise on your bleed, if you do get a bit of discomfort, can be helpful because it helps get oxygen to areas of your body. But it's the time to do more gentle movement, and I guess that depends on the person and what gentle movement means to you. I mean, for me, it's sort of like nothing really. But for some people that doesn't, you know, they need a little bit more. And so a gentle cycle or a gentle walk, or, you know, a gentler vinyasa flow, if you're kind of able to tap out of poses which you think are too much, and you have that kind of control of not being sort of getting competitive with other people in the class. And also weight training is good at that time. So some people don't realize that, but, you know, weight training is actually fine in the times where you need to be slower. So yeah, and then there's not just exercise that changes over the month. There's what kind of foods you can eat. I mean, you can get into quite specific details here, and I think sometimes that may do more harm than good, because I think ultimately, if you're eating healthily, it's great just to eat healthily the whole way through the month. I mean, technically, as I said, when your metabolism is higher and your metabolism is lower, you could slightly shift your calorie intake that way. But I think, in my opinion, and me personally, I don't really like thinking about calories, and so I don't really go there with my patients. The one thing I do just say is that during your premenstrual phase, so the kind of weeks, one or 2 weeks, depending on your cycle before your bleed, so the second half of the cycle, is so important to keep your blood sugar under control at that point, more so than at any point, as it essentially, the kind of more crazy your blood sugar is, the worse your period is going to be. And that can mean having really bad PMS, to having really painful periods, to having really clotted periods. Kind of the output is different with everyone. But if there's ever a time to sort of really concentrate on blood sugar management, so kind of increasing your fat and protein and decreasing your simple carbohydrates and eating really complex ones, it's then. So kind of more in regard to food, I just concentrate on what you should eat more of, rather than what you shouldn't not eat different times of the month. Because there are people out there who talk about, for example, seed cycling. So like seeds you should have at different times of the month and things. I don't normally talk about that. I don't know an awful lot about it. I think, in my opinion, with the food, it's just best to eat healthily all the time. But when it comes to sort of mindset and exercise and sleep, these are all things that genuinely do change or need to change throughout the month to be. And so many women who start doing it come back and they're shocked. I think they're so confused that is something they're only learning age 26 or something, because it's obviously not taught at school. You know, you go and do games and you're expected to be the best you can be every single time, and that's because we are trying to exist as women in a masculine and masculine world. And that's both in terms of work output, so being good at work, attaining the best of the best all the time, but also within just exercise and sporting, again, expected to be the best of the best all the time. And there are times when we're better and there are times that we're not. That's the reality. And that's not a weakness, because actually knowing it and capitalizing on it makes you stronger. Because we have a time in our cycle as women that is, we are told to rest. We are being given an opportunity to rest and are given an opportunity to detoxify. Like, not many people realize how special your bleed is, in the sense that it is, there are so many different ways the body detoxes, but a bleed is one of the most efficient ways. And every month we're given the opportunity to essentially rebirth, to detoxify, to rest and start again. And if you're a man and you're going at it all the time, every single time, that eventually could end up leading to some form of burnout. And actually, if you are a male and you are listening to this, you are welcome to tune into an infradian cycle. I'll gift it to you, because you don't have to have a bleed to do this. I think we could all learn from and benefit from it. And so if you're a woman and you're not bleeding for any reason, or you're a man and you don't have a bleed, then you still can do it. One way you can start doing it is either just to choose a day and make that day 1 and go from there. Or if you'd like to tune into the moon, you can obviously make the full moon day 14 and the new moon day 1 and tune in that way. They're both open to you, but doing so, that wave-like rest and then move is transformational, really. And I haven't seen a woman who hasn't adopted it forever as soon as they've started doing it.
It's so true, and I love everything that you're saying, because I always forget my age. I'm 34 now. I got to that point where I forgot my age, and scrolling back to my date of birth, I already forget. But it's this last year I actually tuned in, and so I read a book called Wild Power, and I can't remember how it was invited for me to read, and it made so much sense. And then I was like, how have I left it this long?
Yeah.
And life felt so much richer because it gave me the permission. I'm like, I'm supposed to slow down now. And I found, even in just feeling what the body wanted, it was almost like tuning into different superpowers. Like, I knew when I felt really outwardly expressive and that when I needed to rest, I actually felt like I wanted to listen to all the podcasts and study and read. And there were all these different elements that worked better at different points if I just gave them the permission to be that way.
Completely. I think one particularly fascinating one is that in our more social phases, so around ovulation in the middle of your cycle, you tend to put your own wishes and wants slightly lower because you're there for others. And so around then the PMS type phase, like just pre-period, that whole idea that women are crazy and mad and like, she's being really PMSy and stuff, is actually your true, your inner, genuinely, it's the stuff you've been suppressing for the good of everyone else. You've not been listening to your own voice as strongly at that point, because it is the time to invite more people into your life and to be a bit more accommodating. And so then as you move forward towards your bleed, and essentially that outward energy starts to diminish and you start really listening to yourself, you then start expressing some of those things, and that is seen to the outside world as, oh, suddenly Lily has all these ideas and opinions and stuff. And I'm like, no, I always have those, they're always there, but I'm just, and therefore that whole concept of you being crazy and mad, I think, again, for women is a huge relief, because there's this whole idea of like, it's absolutely not crazy and mad, it's who you are. And actually it's so important to listen to that voice and to really actually like lean into that voice and think, wait, so why am I actually angry here? Like, who am I angry at? Because if you can figure it out and you can get to the bottom of what these feelings or thoughts are coming from, and you then make those changes, like that's where huge transformation happens, if you can listen to it, rather than just, so many times I hear women, they buy into that whole idea too, and they're like, oh, it's classic, I'm being a raging kind of crazy person, at the moment because but it's fine because I'm on my period. And I'm like, you're not, don't buy into that. That doesn't exist. You are only you are just expressing what you haven't been able to express for a while. So I completely agree with you in the sense that it just does make a lot of sense. I read similar, same book and other ones, and they all just, I think, must have at every page a certain aha moment for women who they're like, oh, does everyone get like that on day 14? And I think what's incredible then, if you do understand what's meant to happen, and when I say meant to happen, we are all very different, we're unique, and we're not all going to fit into a 28-day cycle. In fact, most people don't. We have to talk about the standard cycle just to kind of get the point out there. But for example, again, ovulation, a time of a lot of outward energy. It's when you're meant to actually feel your best. You're meant to feel your best, look your best, do your best. And for many people, it's the opposite, and they feel terrible and don't want to go out and all of this stuff. And that's telling you something, because why that is telling you something is around ovulation, you have a surge of all your hormones. They're all very high. And then it puts a lot of burden on your liver to then effectively detox and metabolize them. And if during ovulation or just after you actually feel terrible and you look terrible and everything's terrible, that's a sign that your liver isn't doing the detoxification process correctly. And so it's a real, for me, hugely insightful tool to work out why someone's hormones have gone awry, and quite often it is the liver actually. But while I love giving women that wisdom, if you are a woman who is incredibly in tune with your cycle and you come and see an alternative practitioner, they will love you because that sort of information is gold dust, and as you say, there are so many women who don't even know it's out there. And so I definitely urge anyone listening who hasn't dipped their toe into the infradian cycle is to read definitely Period Power, the one you said.
Wild Power, but
Wild Power, Period Power. Yeah, there's also one called Flow, I think. They're all amazing, and will probably open your eyes to a whole new world.
Totally. And I like the invitation for guys to find their own sort of rhythm too. One thing I've noticed with my own partner is actually I think sometimes he just tunes into mine.
Yeah.
Now that I give myself, I'm like, oh, it's that time, I'm going to start slowing down. I feel like he says his sympathy slows down with me, but actually patient for him to slow down because he wouldn't otherwise either.
Well, that's amazing. There's kind of, I guess, two ways of doing it. One is sympathy slowing down, so doing the same as what your partner is doing, or your housemate, or whoever it is. But the other option, which I think they mention in one of the books, is actually at a time like ovulation, when we are very outward and able to do a lot, that could be a great time for them to slow down, because we can do everything, we're in control. I can do the cooking and the washing and the working and everything. And actually in my period, when I feel terrible and not terrible, but I want to be, not doing much, that's a great moment for you then to step up and do everything. And actually, if you then can work in opposition of each other, again, you can actually create something quite amazing. And I think one important thing to say, which I hadn't said, is about self-employed versus employment working, because I'm very privileged where being a self-employed person does enable you to tune in a greater way and to be able to slow down when you need to slow down. And I have days when I sit down to work and my brain just says no, and I know and I trust in my body that another day I'll work doubly as efficiently, and therefore I let myself say no on that day and I take the hit, and I go for a walk and don't quote unquote work. And that is a huge privilege to be able to do that. And for those people who are employed and not able to take a day off on the first day of their bleed, or don't have an employer who is going to be sympathetic to you just saying, I've got a bit of a foggy mind today, but I'll be better tomorrow, then it is tough. And I really have sympathy for that, because I was in a position similar to that, where you were more expected to go all the time. And I hope the world is changing. I believe it is slowly, and I think some employers, certainly more ethical employers, are starting to understand women a bit better and realizing that there is more to the working day than go, go, go. But I think there are still things you can do. So as you start to learn about it, for example, if you know on your bleed you do have less energy and less energy, then while you may not be able to take the day off, in the week before then, when you did have a lot of energy, you could make double quantities of all your food so that you've then got 5 meals in the freezer for those evenings when you just can't be bothered to cook. Or you could look at your diary ahead of time and make that week at least socially not full on. Or you could text your friends and say, I'm going to be feeling quite down over the next 3 days or low energy, and I would love if you could maybe do X, Y, or Z for me, asking for help in those sorts of times. Those are things that everyone has at their disposal, because I know that I am speaking from a place of privilege, knowing that I can just be like, today's not working for me, so I'm going to quit.
Yeah, I really resonate with that, actually. It's definitely a good one to check in on. I also really like the idea of just prepping in advance. I find actually sometimes just before, I have this like a day before my bleed where I'm just like, I'm going to get everything. I just find myself cleaning. I clean the bathroom, I cook the things, and I do more in that day than I might have done apart from like when I'm around ovulation. I'm like, where did that come from? But the next day is just like nothing.
Yeah, no, I'm exactly the same. And it happened this month. I actually thought I was going to come on the day that the cleaning day happened. And I was sitting there thinking, Lily, you're meant to be resting. And I was there like literally hoovering the whole house. But it must have, I think it then becomes this inbuilt thing of like, let's get stuff done so that then you can retreat, which is then incredibly useful.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's like preparing the nest.
Really is. And actually also for women who, just mentioning everyone who can get involved, I know that many women who go through menopause and transition into that kind of later hormone cycle really miss their infradian cycle, or if maybe they didn't know about it and you're only learning about this now and you're someone who just no longer has a bleed, it can be quite sad, because I think you look back and you think, goodness, there are all these things I could have taken advantage of and lived in that way. And I just say it's not too late. You can still do it now, as I said, whether with the moon or just deciding that day is day one. Whoever and anyone can. And if you're a mum whose daughter is coming up through puberty, like, this is such an incredible thing to be teaching them, because if you can ingrain it at that age, and they'll be forever grateful, because everyone I talk to, which is largely in their 20s and 30s, just can't believe that they're only hearing it for the first time now.
Mm-hmm. And it is, like you said, you've got the phases of the moon, but you've even got, like, I relate the seasons to the seasons. And so you've got the actual seasons of the entire year. And it does, again, in the same way that plants can connect you to the rhythms of all of life. I feel like this does the same thing. You just see everything's like amalgamated and interwoven.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful, that.
Okay. One thing I'd love to know, especially because of, I have a lot of people and I speak to, and we always end up discussing yoga or meditation or practices like that. But practice comes in so many forms, and it's something that I'm a really big believer of, and I'm really passionate about. And so I'd love to know, what are the things you do to manage stress, to feel more connected to your life? Yeah.
Okay. Well, recently I have really shifted my mornings, and that's made a really positive effect as a more of a preventative tool, I guess, than a symptomatic tool. Like, I have things I do when I feel stressed to help. And then I have, I guess, things I do to make sure I don't get stressed. And my morning routine, I think, is one of those. And it is very new, so I feel quite smug about it, but it may not last. That is that I have started getting up at 6 every day, which was quite new for me. I'd got into quite a bad habit through lockdown of just generally being quite lazy. And so now I get up at 6, and I have a red light, which I love, and I kind of bathe in that for an hour. I don't actually bathe, I just, it's the light of choice for the first hour of the day, which I think really has quite a profound impact for me. And I normally do some form of breath work at that point. Love starting my day that way. And I spend it with my partner as well, which I also love. Again, through the bad habits of lockdown and being lazy, it suddenly became that thing of then you like sleep or don't do anything, and then suddenly it's work, and then after work life happens. And actually to pave out an hour of your day when it is just you and them is so lovely and feels almost like you're going on holiday or something. The first time we did it, when I made this swap, we felt like we were about to go off to the airport, because we were like, what are we doing up early? It's so weird. And also spending that day and spending that hour like either in pajamas or comfortable wear or a dressing gown rather than actually getting up and getting dressed is another amazing way that I trick myself into thinking that I'm on a weekend or on holiday or something, because it just means, because I don't then start working at 7 at all. It's more that hour though is quite sacred, and it's definitely not sort of getting up, getting dressed. It's not about getting anywhere. It's literally just whatever it needs to be, really. And that has become really special. And not looking at my phone, absolutely not in that first hour. Not even probably the first few hours, but that first hour is definitely not. It's only red light anyway. So that's sort of preventatively, I guess, something I do every day, and I think has made already such a massive difference. But symptomatically, if I start to feel stressed, the first thing I would want to do and need to do is go outside, and just be. It doesn't need to be like foraging or anything necessarily. I mean, that happens organically if I'm walking anyway. But just going outside, even if it is for a very small, walk around the block, just get out of the house, basically escape. And interestingly, when you think about the fight or flight response, that is kind of the sympathetic nervous system when you feel stressed, traditionally, when people would have been exposed to that stress, which would normally have been life-threatening, the kind of flight response is because outputting energy at that point means you kind of don't give off the cortisol, but you essentially enable everything to calm down and to pacify. And in today's society, because so many of our stresses aren't deathly, and they are merely just looking at social media or having a stressful email come in, we tend to just sit with them, and that's quite sedentary. And then that stress can build unconsciously and then end up in some form of volcano explosion. And so that flight response is actually very healthy. And so tuning into yourself and becoming aware when you have those minor stresses and choosing to flee doesn't need to be running a marathon or anything, but walking, or if you do want to kind of run up and down the stairs or do star jumps, anything that sort of outputs that energy can be really, really healthy at that point, and something I've started to try and do a bit more of. But I'm not perfect. In Ayurvedic language, more kapha in my disposition, and people who are more kapha tend to traditionally hold a lot. It kind of fits with my profession as well, in the sense that I'm holding other people's space and energy, and I tend to be that person within friends and family groups as well. And even with my own stress, I take it on and I'll hold it and I'll be fine and I'll manage and I'll get through. And like the volcano kind of metaphor, they will hold and hold and hold and hold and hold and be fine, and then we'll have a day when, or a month or a year, I don't know, I've never got to that stage, normally it's a day, when it explodes, and it all comes out and it's quite ugly. And so if you are a kapha type person, or what that means, it is even more important to tune into when you are stressed and do, whether it is going outside and walking or breathing or whatever it is for you, to kind of make sure that volcano doesn't ever erupt, really.
I love that. I love your morning ritual as well, that idea of having sacred space. I have the same thing. And for me, it has to be morning, because by the evening, I'm just like, I won't. It's different.
Yeah. And as I say, I'm a bit smug about it, because there's something about just getting up. 9-6 isn't even early. You read autobiographies of people who get up at 4:30 every day, which is just insane. But like for me anyway, it feels really early, and therefore I feel, as you say, because it's the beginning of the day, like I'm already ahead. I've like gained an extra hour. I've obviously set an intention for the day. Not like I don't necessarily have to do it like actually, like it's more just you're setting the rhythm for the day. I have a very beautiful planner, and I'll like write down the things I want to do that day, and it just gets everything in order, and that therefore wouldn't work at the end of the day. And I think it's just so important to set the rhythm.
Yeah, I feel the same. And I think it also allows me to feel just like connected to myself before anything else has to come in.
Mm-hmm.
And I move from a really different space to the days where I let everything else come in first, and I'm like, who am I?
Yeah, no, that's so true. Like the whole like social media world that we live in, and just the fact that emails are now on our phone. I heard such a funny analogy on a podcast recently where someone said, can you imagine if you were sitting on the loo and the postman like opened the door and just like threw all the post at you? And you'd be like, get out, what are you doing? And it's this whole thing of like, you know, we take everything even to the loo. And he was talking about having an analog poo now, and you like definitely go offline to go to the loo, and how he's had to sort of opt into that because it's become so normal that you'd even take your phone to the loo with you. And I think all of the social media or emails, whatever it is, it's all people asking things of you, and it's putting their external energies on you, whether that's because they're stressed or upset. You know, they're normally asking things of you or telling you things, which exactly is taking their energy and dumping it on you. And so having an hour in the morning, which is phone and laptop free, as you say, literally enables you to work out how you actually are today before someone tells you how you are or changes the mood very quickly upon waking. And so anyone who's looking at your phone when you wake up, you've got to realize that you're not even giving yourself the opportunity to see how yourself is, because one text could change the mood instantly for you and set the tone for the day. And that's you're out of that. That's so out of your control.
Yeah, I really resonate with all of that. Okay, this is how I round off all of them, because it's another thing I love about how words can be so restrictive, and we define everything by words, and they do also really wonderful things. But what I love is hearing the same thing from different people, because we get to see how really rich and layered life is. And so I'd love to know for you, you know, what does joy look like and feel like for you in your life, and what are your means for uncovering it, reclaiming it when it feels lost, and just living and breathing it in its full totality?
Oh, such a good question. What does joy look like for me? It's honestly everywhere at the moment for me, which is such a lovely thing to say and like kind of be aware of and kind of bring gratitude to. And so it's always hard when you are living in it to like notice what it is. Like it's like that classic thing of saying you don't notice you have a perfect head until you get a headache. And so and having like whatever practice it is to sort of attune you to even when stuff is good. But joy, what does joy look like? Joy is very inspiring to me, and that's why it kind of also drew me to your whole podcast kind of theme and things, because uncovering joy in other people is exactly what I love to do too. And I get a huge amount of joy from seeing other people's joys. And I think I'm like almost too overwhelmed to answer this question. I obviously, one danger for me, I guess, is that because I love my work so much, is like getting that like work-life boundary. But I don't know, people talk about it so much and I worry that I need it. But then I'm like, but my work is in plants and that's what brings me joy, and I'm happy to do it all the time. And I don't know, I can't answer it. I'm too joy-filled. Maybe. What was the second part of your question?
If there are times where you feel like distance from the joy, like
how do you find it?
Dream of like infinite, like what do you do to kind of reclaim it and uncover it again?
Okay, maybe this will help me decide what actually joy then is, because I can answer this one a bit better. So on a very like small and literal level, whenever I get in a funk and I feel down or whatever, or even resistant to doing anything, to be honest. My partner's forced, and my housemate actually, both of them are very good at doing this. They force me to dance. And normally it has to be ABBA. Dancing Queen is preferable. And it instantly will, it's something about movement that releases it. For me, again, I guess it brings it back to the fight or flight thing. And the world feels all right again by the end of the song. And that's all it takes, one song. That's on like a very small literal level of like when I'm literally needing joy. For me, it has to be dance. On a larger scale, I think journaling and things like that are just really reflective tools that normally make me work out what's missing. And actually, I wanted to end therefore by saying that one thing regarding joy is me and two of my friends have something which we call dwaj, which means dinner with added joy. And basically we sit around, have dinner. Unfortunately, we can't do it anymore actually physically because we all live in very different places. But the idea is still there. And I think there are 6 classifications. So it's like work, health, hobbies. I think travel was one of them, relationships, self, or something like that. I can't quite remember what the 6 were. And we'd give them all a rating 1 out of 10 every single time we saw each other. And I think for me, that's what joy looks like for me, because sometimes you could be doing so well at work and you could be achieving all your hopes and dreams and your career can be great, but you've neglected your partner or your mum or your sister, or you haven't done any exercise or something like that. And so that's not optimum joy for me, because you can, when you do the dinner without a joy, you can create a circle, and at 1 out of 10 you can put a point on it's really hard to describe, but then you join up all the lines and you might find that there's like a massive dip, which is where you scored 1 on exercise or something. And it's very eye-opening exercise to uncover and work out why you're not ultimately happy. And you literally have to do it sometimes. It's not something which is easy to notice unless you sit down and you think of your whatever categories are important to you. You could do it with anything. You just got to think about 6 important categories in your life. And I think it's normally those times when one is really dominant. And so you think, I should be so happy right now. I'm acing it, or I'm so fit at the moment and I'm really exercising well, or I'm literally so in love with my partner and we couldn't be more happy, but you don't actually feel fully happy. It's because one of the other dimensions in life isn't completely fulfilled. And of course, you're never going to hit 10s on all of them all the time, but you can always aspire to it. So that's what I'd say.
I love that. We do something similar with a mentoring that's like a life stock take. And I think sometimes it's that, life's so busy, we forget to pause and actually reflect on what feels really good, and also to recognize things can feel really good whilst other things don't. And it's just that's what you shift your attention to then nourish that aspect of life.
Exactly. It's looking at what canister needs filling up a little bit more. And when I then feel in those moments, which I guess I'm feeling at the moment a bit more, when all of those are in a good, healthy balance, then you just seem to find joy in everything. And I guess that's what I was saying before in terms of when you said, what does joy look like for me? I mean, it's everywhere when you are in that space. So then it's quite hard to explain.
I think you really hit the nail on the head, and it's something that yoga, one of my favorite aspects of yoga, speaks to. And so there's this state of being called vishoka, and it's a joy that's untouched by external circumstances. And so when you access it, it is that everything around you, no matter it changing, no matter it being uncertain, you still feel joyful. You still see the beauty that exists around you. And so I love that you're feeling that, and actually the access point to that is understanding that we get to fulfill so many different areas of life, and it's working when you're in that state of being.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's exactly it. You just put it in a much better way.
It's awesome. And I also love that you said that one of your access points of joy is allowing other people to access theirs. I think it was the Dalai Lama. There's this quote where he was just like, if you can be happy because someone else is happy, then you'll never be unhappy, because someone's always going to be happy. That's That's so great.
Yeah, that is great. And actually, you know, I have been definitely a person previously when I wasn't maybe as joyful, who when other people were really happy, I took some form of negative from that because it made me question my own happiness, and there was an element of maybe jealousy or envy or whatever. And I really, that's so shifted, and I really feel much more open to fully feeling other people's joy and actually realizing that I can myself get joy out of their joy. And then, as you say, you're winning.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Okay. I could chat to you forever, but I will say thank you and I'll wrap up. One thing I will invite for people listening is that Lily has so kindly recorded a tea ceremony for us that allows you that access point of becoming mindful and connected and slowing down and tuning into the properties of plants. And so I highly recommend it. It's really beautiful. It just inspires you to drink tea in a way that you may have never before. At least for me, I got very excited. I went and ordered all the teas. I went and ordered hibiscus straight away. And if you want to make it extra special and actually have, you know, really beautiful tea to connect to, Lily's details are all going to be within the blurb. So you can connect to her if you want an actual session and just tune in a little deeper. You can also access through the same website her teas, and I highly recommend them. I am obsessed. But I remember when I first tried, I specifically tried I've tried so many of them, but there was the calm one, which my partner and I were drinking. And for the first time in ever, we couldn't finish watching a film. We had to get straight to bed. We were so relaxed. And it happened the second night. And I was like, it's not us, it's the tea. Like it really does something. So if you want to
that is a testimonial that I need to put on my website. It makes you this calm because you fell asleep. So watching film.
We didn't even we chose not to watch the film. That's how calm I felt. I was like, this isn't fulfilling me. Like, let's go to bed. And the same with my mom. I've been giving it to my mom who struggles to sleep, and she's had the same experience. So you can make your tea ceremony extra special by ordering some and having a great time. Lily, thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting me to be on this. I feel very humbled.
Oh my gosh, I feel humbled, and it's been such a delight, and I can't wait to find out more. And for everyone else, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time for another episode.